Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Zoom time of worship. It's fantastic to be with all you again in the digital world, virtually. But I do feel blessed that we get to catch up and connect together via Zoom, via what technology we have. Next week, we're actually going to be launching a YouTube channel, so that's going to be an option as well for us to tune into, a live streamed version of this service on YouTube. So we're just continually working and developing what we're able to do here. I just want to thank you all again now that May Missions Month is over for all of your input and donations and support for our local mission Pickle, which is our Phillip Island Community and Adult Learning Centre. They do an amazing job around this whole region in networking with other agencies, providing support in many different ways. And during this time of isolation and restrictions, they've been doing a great job at providing meals and essential needs for our vulnerable people in our local community. Many of you would have received an email this week just giving an update on what's happening at church in regards to our building. Are we going to reopen our Sunday morning church services in regards to having people here and those sorts of things? According to the government, we can now have 20 people. However, as a church leadership team and myself in conversations with the Baptist Union of Victoria, we've actually decided just to observe and hold off to see what's going to happen in the community over the next few weeks, as we still see a risk in coming together in larger numbers. So we're going to be keeping you all updated. Watch this space as we journey through this together. Now this week we're starting a new series, and it's called What Would Jesus Undo? Many of you would have heard the term what would Jesus do, and many people reflect and live their lives in trying to follow Jesus, and when they reach a particular situation, they get to a particular point, they ask themselves, what would Jesus do here? But we're actually talking about what would Jesus undo in this series. And like most weeks, there's actually a pre-recorded message on our website that you can watch. There's also that same message on our Facebook page as well. And this is a 4-week series. We're going to be covering different subjects such as hollow worship, hypocrisy, pride, and these are all things that Jesus would undo. They're not things that Jesus would do. And today we're actually going to be talking about spiritual indifference. And this morning I'm just going to unpack that a little bit as we venture through this series as well. Some of the Connect groups are joining in with the Connect group material that's provided with this series. So as a whole church, we can go on this journey together. So look, this morning I'm just going to briefly summarize, if you will, the topic. If you want to go deeper, please check out the pre-recorded sermon on our webpage or Facebook. But the main passage for this morning comes from Revelations chapter 3, verses 15 to 16, where we read, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. It's a pretty serious passage, isn't it? We could interpret this passage as God saying, you are spiritually stale, depressingly detached, and it doesn't just break God's heart. God is saying this doesn't just break my heart, it turns my stomach so much so that God would spit you out. So what causes this? We're calling what's going on here that this passage is talking about spiritual indifference. What causes this? Well, I'm going to cover 2 points this morning very quickly, and the first one is self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency. And in Revelations 3:17, we read as the passage goes on, you say, I am rich. I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. We live in a time of abundance, don't we? Especially if you live in Australia. If you live in Australia, the likelihood is that you probably have more than you need. We are very well off in comparison to many other people in the world. And if we do get in trouble, if we do run into financial difficulty, we have support from various agencies, from the government. And the issue can become that you might have wealth, you might have things, you might have an abundance of stuff. However, the problem is that you are spiritually bankrupt, spiritually dead. Your life might be full of stuff, however, it may be empty of meaning. And this is a real problem in the West, especially amongst the middle class, where we have so much stuff that we feel we don't need God. We feel that we don't need to invest into our spiritual life. Why? Because everything's already sorted out. And that can lead to spiritual indifference. The second thing I want to touch on today are the distractions of this world. How distracting can life be? The passage here is Mark chapter 4, verse 19. But the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. I'd like you to take a moment and reflect and think about what distractions do you have in your life? What distracts you? I'd like you to also think about whether these times of restrictions and isolation because of coronavirus have been a time of less distractions. Has this been a less distracting time? If it has, if this time has been a time of reflection and resetting, where you've been able to regroup and simplify and change your pace of life perhaps, then I'd like to challenge you. I'd like to challenge myself. And I'd like to encourage you to be very careful re-entering life, if you will. I want to encourage you to hang on to what you've learned. Think about how you can maintain what you've discovered during this lockdown period and put things in place in order to avoid the distractions of this world. You know, the simpler life is something that can counteract spiritual indifference. The passage that I read earlier referring to hot or cold, it's talking about a passage that was written to a church in a location called Laodicea. Laodicea was a wealthy city. It had been rebuilt because 35 years earlier it had been destroyed by an earthquake. It had theatres, stadiums, lavish public baths, shopping centres, all manners of comfort. It was sort of the happening place to be. Some people describe that it may have been similar to Las Vegas or Dubai. They had it made. They had all the entertainment and comforts that they could have wanted. Leisure. They had it all, but were spiritually dead. As we emerge out of this pandemic, let us hang on to a simpler life. Let us seek a simpler life with less distractions. Let us learn how to be content, something that we struggle with in this consumeristic and individualistic culture. But let us learn to be content in order to avoid spiritual indifference. I'm now going to pray. Lord, Father God, we thank you that you are a God that we can look at and say, what would you do? But we also know that there are things that you would undo. And this morning we're talking about spiritual indifference. Lord, I pray that for those who have spiritually gone a bit numb, spiritually fallen a bit asleep, Lord, I pray that there will be a reignition, a reburning in those people's hearts, in our hearts, to seek you and connect with you spiritually, to live a life of faith and not rely on material, worldly things. Lord, I pray for your Spirit to empower us and to walk a life that is reflective of who you are, not reflective of